Mothers who have kids then decide they don't want to be around them.
I don't have to get them to brush their teeth. I don't have to be up until 11:30 to do their homework. I don't miss that.
But what do their children miss?
Do you love your children?
More than anything.
More than yourself?
Should a mother love her children more than herself?
Moms moving out. Plus, mothers and daughters fighting it out. This teenager wants to have her baby. She says her parents want her not to.
They talked about trying to slip her some kind of an abortion pill. It was more of a joking type thing.
A showdown that leads to court.
He said, our daughter is suing us.
The war at home. Mortified by mom in a two-piece, dad in silly shorts. You ain't seen nothing yet.
My life revolves around her boobs.
The ones her mother keeps implanting.
And this kid says, your mom has big boobs. It's so weird and awkward.
I'm not going to change this part of me. Can't live my life trying to please you.
Mother of the year. And dads, we didn't forget you. Just in time for Father's Day. Leaving your child alone in a stroller in the splash zone at SeaWorld.
If you're that stupid, I want you caught on tape.
Child's Play. Tonight, with parents like these.
Don't our parents always embarrass us?
Not like that. Here's Elizabeth Vargas and David Muir.
Good evening. They were harsh words. I hope she rots in hell. But those are the words from a daughter whose mother just resurfaced after intentionally disappearing, leaving her daughter for more than a decade. And it made us wonder, with parents like these...
David, most people think it's the greatest taboo of motherhood. Voluntarily leaving your children, taking a timeout that can stretch into years. But the moms I met are convinced that what they have done is making them even better mothers. You take a look and decide. Mother of the Year she isn't. 11 years ago, Brenda Heist dropped off her 8 and 12-year-old children at school and then vanished. In news reports, her grieving family said they assumed she'd been kidnapped or murdered.
It was tough. I mean, every prom, my brother graduated from high school and college. I graduated, and she wasn't there.
But last month, Heist finally reappeared, looking worse for wear, and made a stunning admission. She had abandoned her family on purpose. It's the rare extreme of a mom gone AWOL. The reaction? Widespread revulsion. Don't judge, says Mom Talia Liera. She's no Brenda Heist, not even close, but she's faced similar scorn for deciding to live apart from her children.
I had a lot of shame because of the way that we think about what mothers should be.
That they would never leave their children.
Some people think that.
Talia is a so-called non-custodial mother, a mom without physical custody of her kids. In 2008, she moved to Seattle after a divorce, leaving her 3 children, Nathaniel, Eric, and Serena, to live with their dad, David, 2,800 miles away in Pennsylvania. Talia spends her days painting, writing, making music, and practicing martial arts with her boyfriend. Mothering?
Hey, give me a wide shot of your room. I just want to see what it looks like.
Well, that's done from afar.
And I will walk you through the steps of the scrambled eggs. And the...
Oh, sure. She emails recipes for them to cook for themselves.
Pancakes.
And she stays in touch on phone and via Skype.
You sound a little like you have a cold.
Yeah, I have a cold.
But they only see each other in person around once a year.
Okay, well, Miss Sweet Cake, I will talk to you again soon.
We talk all the time. We're very connected.
And that's as good as being there.
I can't answer that it's as good as. It's just different.
I know a lot of people listening to this will want to know, do you love your children?
Absolutely. More than anything.
More than yourself?
Should a mother love her children more than herself?
Startling as this may sound, there are an estimated 2.4 million non-custodial mothers in the United States. Many of these mothers are heartbroken by the loss of custody. But some moms, like Talia, give up custody voluntarily. Author Rana Reiko is also a non-custodial mother. Her teenage sons were 3 and 5 when she and her husband divorced. Since then, she sees them for 4 to 5 hours, 3 days a week, an arrangement she initiated.
They come over after school, they stay until bedtime, and then he comes to pick them up and they go home to bed.
Rana is brutally honest about why she made her decision.
I never wanted to be a mother initially. I realized that I had kind of fallen into this role that I had never intended to fall into.
Rana wanted to devote herself full-time to her writing, not to her children. She is the rare mom to admit that she does not pine for the daily grind of parenting.
I don't have to get them to brush their teeth. I don't have to be up until 11:30 to do their homework. I don't miss that.
Talia has a different reason for leaving. She says post-divorce conflict between her and David was causing enormous stress for her and the sons, and that leaving, while a wrenching decision, was the only way to ease the tension.
Why so far away? Why did you have to move 3,000 miles away?
At that point, was it 10 miles or 3,000 miles or 3 million miles? It really wouldn't make any difference.
Well, because at 10 miles you could still see the kids and be a presence in their lives.
Right, but in order for the conflict to go away, there had to be a certain distance.
David says there was no conflict, and he says Talia's sudden transformation from stay-at-home mom to West Coast bohemian was astonishing.
I'm completely surprised even to this day.
And his friends?
They were shocked. It's like, how could a mom leave her children like this? What got into her? But she has a spiritual connection with them.
See, I could just, pet you.
That is rather profound, and accordingly, she doesn't seem to need to have that physical contact with them.
How's my boy?
Complicating matters further, Talia's youngest child, Eric, has Down syndrome. Their longest time apart was more than 2 years. Kisses with mom? Well, a computer will have to do.
You have a special needs child. Did it make you think that you owed it to him to be there for him?
Eric is the kind of child that connects to whomever he's around. It sounds strange to say this from his mother, but people are kind of interchangeable to him. And I could tell from how he is that he will have a wonderful life, whoever he's around.
Talia has been called selfish, irresponsible, and delusional. Rana has been called worse.
I got death threats. I got people telling me that I am evil, that I'm worse than Hitler, that I'm human garbage.
Some mothers would say your decision to leave was putting care for yourself ahead of care for your children.
I think that better women make better mothers. When you love and know yourself, then you can be a better mother for your children.
But how are you being a better mother 3,000 miles away?
Because I'm in touch with who I am.
I know, but how is that benefiting them?
It allows me to make choices for my children from my heart rather than from what I think society tells me about what a mother should be.
I've never seen him play his drums.
Oh, really? You haven't?
No, I don't think I have.
You chose to be a mother. Aren't you now just abdicating that responsibility and saying, well, I don't want to sacrifice anything? Shouldn't mothers sacrifice for their children?
I think no mother should have to completely sacrifice. I think to sacrifice your own wants and needs and desires for someone else's life, what kind of a message is that sending your children?
Here's a surprise. Not only is her ex-husband David satisfied with the arrangement,
I think it's been great for the family, from my standpoint.
Talia's son Nathaniel supports his mom despite the distance.
Yeah, it's difficult, but no, I'm not going to grow up hating her and never speaking to her again. I think my mom's a good mom, even from far away.
But for 11-year-old Serena, who was only 8 when her mom left, the emotional toll is palpable.
When I was growing up, my mom lived with us. Then I have a lot of happy memories.
Serena saves every memento from her mother.
These are some Christmas wrappings that I saved. These are like my birthday cards and stuff. They're kind of special since we don't get to see her a lot.
And she's become a surrogate mother for Eric.
I make Eric's lunch and I feed him breakfast. Sometimes I am actually kind of angry with her that I don't have a mother to do what a mother does.
In her blog, The Better Mothers Project, Talia defends her decision with her message that there is not only one right way to be a mother. Rana agrees. She says she has managed to have it all, an award-winning book and a close relationship with her sons.
I think if I was a man, then none of this would be an issue. People have this idea of what a good mother is. I don't fit that mold, but I definitely fit the mold of a terrific divorced dad.
It's been a while since I've seen your face.
Yeah, it has.
Talia has lived apart from her children for 5 years now. We checked in with Serena just last week. She's 13 years old now and says adjusting to life without mom has become easier.
Our relationship is really a lot closer than it was before. We talked about relationship problems and, what's going on in the girl's body and, all that stuff.
On the last day of 8th grade, he was going to ask her out because that's the first day.
And I really love my mom a lot.
But Serena's vision of her future life as a mother?
As a mom, I never want to be apart from my children. I want to make that perfect family that she was never able to do. I want that really badly now.
Mama loves you. Bye.
So what do you think about these mothers who move out? Let us know on Twitter using the hashtag ABC2020. We'll be right back.
Next, whose side would you be on? The 16-year-old who wants to have her baby, or the parents she says want her to terminate it?
We had talked about trying to
her some kind of an abortion pill. It was more of a joking type thing.
So is it worth suing your parents?
He said, our daughter is suing us.
Next on With Parents Like These. 2020 returns. Here's Deborah Roberts.
It's a family feud in Biggest, Texas.
Holy crap.
Two teens in love, their parents in hate, their lawyers in court,
Now it's a victory for life.
the media in a tizzy.
They told me the allegations were false.
At the center of it all, 16-year-old Reagan. Hers was a typical childhood in Houston's ranch country, horseback riding, volleyball. But things started going south when her parents, Jeff and Denise Cohen, split up.
Was that hard on you?
It was hard on me because, I was so used to seeing them, together in the same house.
During the turbulence, Reagan met Evan Madison on Facebook, a fellow horse lover from a neighboring school.
She is just sweet, kind, just everything I want.
He was just very sweet and a gentleman.
And next thing you know, you're dating.
Dating was soon more than holding hands and cuddling.
How quickly did it become sexual?
Probably not until we started dating for like 3 or 4 months.
Were you worried at all about possibly getting pregnant?
I was worried, but I was on birth control, and I quit taking it, and then the moment I quit taking it is whenever
you got pregnant.
A positive pregnancy test said it all.
What was your reaction when you found out she was pregnant?
Shocked. Wasn't expecting me to be 16 and having a baby, that's for sure.
Did you have any opinion about babies and abortion and teen pregnancy?
I would always watch like Teen Mom and stuff. I feel I saw, all those moms that are out there, they can do it with their babies.
At first, the young couple kept the pregnancy a secret, then fessed up to Evan's mom and dad, Jamie and Joey.
I'm the boss, that's how that works.
Were you upset?
It's just kind of like a wow moment. Like, I was going to support the kids. Whatever they decided.
Jamie offered to break the news to Reagan's mom, whose reaction was quite different.
It's like, we're going to take care of it. I'm going to take care of business.
And what did you mean, take care of business?
That basically terminate the pregnancy.
Two moms, two radically different views. Jamie was herself a teen mom.
I'm definitely not endorsing it. It requires a lot of dedication and hard work and sacrifice, but it can be done.
Reagan's mom, Denise, admits she had an abortion and wanted her daughter to consider it as an option.
There were accusations that you had talked about trying to slip her some kind of an abortion pill.
It was more of a joking, do you think I could, type thing, and let somebody else be in the same position and to see what they would say.
Emotions between the two families soon hit a boiling point when Jeff learned his only child was pregnant.
What did you think should happen?
It's a mistake done by kids that obviously don't know what they're doing. We'd sit down and have conversations with her, and yes, they were heated conversations, and I did let her have it. I did absolutely let her have it.
Did you feel you were being pressured?
When my dad stepped in, he stepped in with my mom and said, I don't care, you're going to get an abortion, and, it's my way or the highway, that kind of attitude.
Do you respect her decision?
Honestly, no.
No.
I don't respect her decision.
Things got so ugly that police were called to the Burnside's house as recently as 4 weeks ago.
One location of your emergency. We just have a harassment, verbally harassing. It's my dad.
Jeff Cohen insists he never harassed the Burnsides, and no police reports were ever filed.
Did you threaten her in any way at that moment?
Never, at any point in time, that girl has never been threatened. We wanted to fully understand that she knew what the future held for her.
For Reagan, the future definitely included a baby at any cost.
She asked us to please help her. And, I said, I don't know what I can do, but I'll figure out something.
Jamie and Joey Burnside went into action and found attorneys with the Texas Center for Defense of Life who were ready to go to court.
A lawsuit never would have been filed if her parents had been willing to do the right thing, in our opinion, which is to allow her to make the choice to have the child.
During a meeting at this local restaurant, the attorney arranged a clandestine plan. With her mom waiting outside in her car, Reagan slipped into the ladies' room with the notary and signed the filing for a temporary restraining order. Eventually, Reagan would legally free herself from her parents. The courts call it emancipation.
But why not sit down and talk it out and try to sort it out? Why go to court?
I felt like it was never going to end.
Today, a civil court judge granted a temporary restraining order.
The parents were blindsided when a local reporter broke the news to them.
I spoke with the teen's father. He didn't want to go on camera.
He said, "Our daughter is suing us." Really? You know, she was somewhat nonplussed. And she said, yeah.
In the lawsuit, it says that her parents had done multiple actions: removal of the cell phone, removal from school the previous day, forcing her to get 2 jobs, taking away her car, and other demands because she was refusing to give in to their coercion to have an abortion.
That is inaccurate. The way it was laid out was wrong. You know, we weren't trying to force her, coerce her, or what have you. At this stage of the game, at this point, you know, we were working to, make a plan for life.
The teen's father wasn't happy.
The pregnant teen with the support of her boyfriend.
The case became a national media sensation.
Do you have the determination to be a good father?
And I said, I hope that you're proud that you have sued your parents. I just want to let you know that those attorneys are not going to be there for you. So they got what they wanted.
Denise and Jeff deny trying to force their daughter to do anything, saying Reagan has been manipulated by media-hungry lawyers. Still, they signed a court order. But Jeff was clearly unhappy about it.
We've basically had our child ripped away from us through the court system. Parental rights just, you're just done. You're done today.
249.
At nearly 5 months pregnant, we found Reagan shopping for baby clothes. She was working, and Evan had lost his after-school job at a local grocery store.
How do you plan to support yourself? How are you going to care for your baby?
We're, going to try to be very, money-wise. We've actually saved about $300-400.
That won't get you too far.
No. I mean, it's going to be hard.
Perfect.
Weeks later, decked out in cowboy gear, the teenagers formally tied the knot.
We are gathered here today to celebrate this woman in holy matrimony.
Reagan's parents were not invited.
It ripped my heart out. I never, ever, ever thought I could feel that way in my life. That's one of the things that parents look forward to, just watch them get married and be there with them through all the big events of their lives.
And late this week, we went back to Texas to catch up and discovered that another big event had just happened. Reagan and Evan had a falling out with Evan's parents, so they're now actually living with Reagan's mom. The very mom she sued. They're all happily awaiting the baby, due this September. We'll be right back.
Next, does mother know best? Not according to her humiliated kids. When she's planning on trading up her implants.
If she gets them bigger, it'd be like chaos.
What if she died? Does she really care that her kids could be left alone?
Next on With Parents Like These. We return to 2020s With Parents Like These. Here's Deborah Roberts.
Taking a walk with mom is a challenge for Lacey Wild's 17-year-old daughter, Tori.
She's bouncing. When people see my mom with large implants, I feel like they judge me. Usually girls just laugh at her, make fun of her. Men just calling out, oh. My life revolves around her boobs.
Every moment, Tori keeps a wary distance.
Bye, guys.
After all, it's not easy living with a mom whose 52-inch assets are on clear display.
It's annoying. I feel like we should have a normal time, walking down the street. I wish she could take them off when we go places together.
Gun shoes.
Lacey Wild is all about living large.
Bye, everybody!
Very, very large. Much to the dismay of her son, Brandon.
Everything's fake, I think. I don't think she looks pretty at all. I think she looked pretty before she even had the surgery.
Lacey claims to have the 7th largest breasts in the world, a way to support her family through public appearance fees. But those volleyball-sized implants are the source of bitter conflict between mom and daughter.
People will start booking her, kind of like, when you go see, the two-headed man. It's not like they're booking her because, oh, wow, she's,
Thank you, dear. I just love
I'm
you
just saying.
saying
Basically
people say I'm the sideshow. You guys can play on your iPads, and as soon as I'm done here, we'll go to the park for a little while, okay?
All right. Lacey's work on her website cuts into mom time, according to younger kids Genevieve and Brandon.
She's always busy on the computer, her phone, iPad. She never does anything with us. She's like,
I just got asked to go to the grand opening of a daycare because they want the dads to get involved.
So how much do you think you'll make because of those breasts?
I'm looking to maybe make $250,000 a year. My boobs are my paycheck for sure.
Your boobs are your paycheck?
100%.
It wasn't always this way. Lacey started life as a tomboyish girl next door named Paula.
I was just a flat-chested, brown-haired little girl from a Midwest town. That's the house I grew up in. I slept on the floor, but I don't think I'll ever be that poor again.
Married at 16, divorced with 2 kids by 21, she was scraping by as a waitress when suddenly she had a big idea.
I changed my hair color. I got my breasts done. And my money just started rolling in.
12 breast surgeries later, goodbye Paula, hello Lacey Wild. But being Lacey comes at a cost. She can't even pick up her 5-year-old daughter.
That's gonna work. I can't lift her up and pull her to me because, let's be honest, I mean, I'm out pretty far. I can't work out, I can't jog.
We used to ride bikes together like every night, and we can't do that anymore.
Sleep, too, is a difficult balancing act.
she has to have like a pillow on her boob. Yeah, just have like 3 pillows under her boob.
After a little while, I can't take it anymore. I feel like I'm being suffocated.
She sleeps like this. Like a mummy. She's like...
Lacey's kids endure a much greater hardship every day, the scalding shame of public embarrassment.
My mom was going to drop me off at school, and this kid says, "Your mom has big boobs." That made me feel so crazy, so weird and awkward. Yes.
I do want my kids to be happy and not be embarrassed of me and not be, have to worry about being bullied at school or feel embarrassed at all.
So at home in sunny South Florida, Lacey sometimes goes to great lengths to come off like the mom next door.
Extra large pants, extra large jacket is required for this operation. So look, normal mom, right? In 100-degree weather.
Nice try, but not good enough for 11-year-old Brandon.
I want her to get them smaller, not stay the same or get bigger, and then I would be happy.
Well, get ready, kids, for a new round of zany.
Mind you, anybody?
Lacey's about to double the size of her breasts, going from a triple L to a triple Q.
If she gets them bigger, it'd be like chaos.
They'll be like 42 pounds.
Is it safe?
Absolutely not. These aren't safe. I'm a walking time bomb, is what the doctor told me.
The surgery is so risky, no American doctor will do it. Tori is outraged that her mom is willing to take that chance.
What if she died? Is she really taking that into consideration? Does she really care that her kids could be left alone?
But Lacey's fans urge her on, donating for the upcoming procedure in Brazil.
When people put on the internet oh, I'm gonna kill myself or I'm gonna do this, people write on there do it, because they don't really care. They just want to see you do something crazy, and then they're done. So you're gonna do it?
Well, I haven't done it yet, so.
No, and that wasn't what I asked.
Your daughter Tori is really upset with you.
She thinks that I'm being irresponsible by putting my life on the line.
You say it's upsetting, I feel bad, I don't want them to be upset, but why do it?
It's the money. It's the money. I need the money.
Money to send Tori to college and care for her 2 younger children. Come on, though. There are people who are working 2 jobs at a grocery store, at a department store.
I was doing okay, but I've quadrupled my income.
Do you ever regret this?
No, actually, I don't regret it. I would do it again. Absolutely.
Even knowing that your kids are upset and embarrassed.
Don't our parents always embarrass us?
The other day I went to a party, and this kid came out and he's like, "Are you Tori?" He's like the one that has the mom with the big boobs. I'm like, "Yep, that's me."
Do you think that this could permanently damage your relationships with your children?
I don't think so. My kids are for me. I am very loving. My heart's bigger than my boobs.
Next, dozens of drunken teens at a party. Some passed out in the yard.
They say there were beer cans and vomit everywhere.
But when the police came, who got in trouble? The parents inside, who didn't buy a drop of liquor.
The first thing that I remember was a policeman saying that my dad was going to jail.
A mom, a dad, and a gross out party. Next on With Parents Like These.
What's a party without entertainment? Just recently, some R-rated pictures popped up on Facebook of strippers supposedly hired by a mother for her 16-year-old son's birthday. So how does that compare to a high school party with no strippers but lots of drinking? That's more common and potentially more dangerous. But for whom? The kids or their parents? Prom and graduation season have arrived, and along with the dresses, corsages, caps, and gowns, and the parties. Raucous teen bashes that can strike fear in the heart of any parent. Paula and Barry Spencer know the feeling well. For them, last June 16th started out as a day of celebration.
There was a lot of jumping up and down. Yeah, it was amazing.
Their 18-year-old son, Nicky, along with his high school baseball team, had just won the state championship. It was a big day for the small town of Falmouth, Maine.
Nicky asked if he could have a celebration at our home.
I didn't know necessarily what the party would entail, but I mean, it's assumed that people are going to be crazy and pumped up and hyper after a big win.
The Spencers enjoyed entertaining their son's large group of friends, but say they would never cross the line. Like the dad in this what would you do scenario who actually buys alcohol for his teenage son.
You never do a party for the kids?
No, never. I have 4 of them. My oldest is 30. Never. It's the wrong message to send them.
The Spencers say they were definitely looking to avoid sending that message. What were the ground rules?
He actually told us we'll keep it to 50, and I said nothing illegal.
Those would prove to be famous last words.
Barry came to me and said, I'm starting to see people sneaking in alcohol.
People from other towns started hearing about it, and it started having people show up who I didn't recognize, and kind of got a little out of control.
Around 10:30 p.m., an anonymous tip comes into the Falmouth police that there are more than soft drinks being served at the Spencers' home. Sergeant George Savage was on duty.
When I pulled up to the house, a gentleman came out and identified himself as Mr. Spencer and that he was hosting an alcohol and chemical-free party.
Sergeant Savage leaves, but the partygoers keep arriving.
I saw lots of people coming with just boxes and boxes of beer in the woods.
So when the police first came to your house, you already knew things were getting a little dicey. It was a little more than you can handle.
Yes.
Why aren't you walking through the house saying, time to go home?
I felt like I invited these kids to our home to celebrate, and I didn't have clear evidence that they were all drinking. And I also really felt at the time that if I walked around and said, all right, everybody, we're shutting it down, I thought they'd run to their cars or they'd do something that's more dangerous than what they were actually doing.
So you thought it was safer to let them stay and continue the party at your house?
But not drink.
At 11:30, another Falmouth police officer makes a traffic stop near the house. In the car, he finds one of the passengers is a drunken underage girl who says she has just come from the party. Police make a beeline back to the Spencers. How had the scene changed?
At this point, now, it looked like there was a party going on.
Not just a party, a rager that has ballooned to around 100 rowdy kids, openly drinking in the backyard when police descend to break it up.
It was just mayhem. They started breathalyzing any kids that were trying to leave.
The first thing that I remember was a policeman saying that my dad was going to jail.
Going to jail, even though the Spencers didn't provide a drop of the alcohol? 2 parents due in court today. It's happening to parents all over the country, like this mom who was sentenced to 6 months in a Massachusetts jail for hosting underage drinkers, even though she claims she was duped by duplicitous teens. And this Tennessee school teacher, arrested and then fired for the post-prom drinking party she says she unwittingly threw. Denials aside, District Attorney Stephanie Anderson believed the Spencers were the latest example of parents turning a blind eye to tipsy teenagers.
There was no real attempt to prevent underage drinking at that home.
She points to the police report from that night, which describes a scene fit for a frat house, complete with a teenager passed out on a neighbor's lawn. They described the scene at your house that night as, quote, an animal house. An animal house. They say there were beer cans and vomit everywhere.
It's just not true.
But Anderson didn't buy their story, and she went after the Spencers, charging them with allowing minors to consume alcohol in their home, a crime that now has them facing jail time.
They wanted to be the cool parents.
Q97.9 is Portland's #1 hit music station. The story quickly got the attention of the local media.
I mean, can you imagine at that moment how you're going to feel? I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get arrested for this. Wrong. 21 and over, you can drink. 21 and under, you can't drink. It's the law.
A few clicks on YouTube illustrates the ever more devious and dangerous ways kids are finding to get drunk. From eyeball shots to vodka gummy bears to downing hand sanitizer, It may make you wonder whether adult-supervised drinking parties are such a bad idea. What's more dangerous? Having my kids down in the basement where I know they're going to drink a few beers, or having them go out to the softball field at night and drink where there's nobody to keep an eye on anything?
In this scenario, there's no difference at all. There wasn't anyone there to keep an eye on anything.
But Anderson had a hard time convincing a jury of that. When it did go to trial, it was split down the middle,
Yes.
6-6.
Yeah.
Did that surprise you?
No, not terribly. It's a very divisive issue.
Rather than retry the Spencers, Anderson offered them a deal. No jail time, but they would have to pay $17,000 in fines and restitution, write a letter of apology in the local newspaper, and serve 100 hours of community service each. You know that there are critics who say that you were overzealous in this, that you have a cause you're promoting.
Well, underage drinking is one of my causes, that's true.
But do you really think you're going to stop underage drinking?
No, I don't think I'm going to stop underage drinking.
So then what you did, haven't you chased it back to the unsupervised, unchaperoned location?
Well, I think what this case did was it got the issue out in the open. I think parents are putting themselves in the position of the Spencers and saying, what should I do differently? If I'm going to have a party, I better have chaperones.
We did not intend for kids.
Parents think some of this stuff is cute, and that child, subconsciously or in the future, may not trust his father as much.
It takes it in stride, though. Dunk. Falls down, gets right back up.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Check out this dad at a theme park leaving his son unattended in the splash zone. Okay, he's not big enough to get in the water ride, so we'll just park him near where the water will hit him and he'll get kind of the experience. Don't do that to your kids. From the theme park to the ballpark, often the venue for classic dad discombobulation. Look at this guy.
She's got a baby. One hand does it, and on the other. Here is second of the year. 3 home runs.
This dad doesn't even manage to hold on to the kid. His daughter just tumbles out of his lap into the bleachers.
Yeah, the look on her face pretty much tells the story.
Yeah, you idiot. She gave him the death stare, and he deserved it.
Is there something about the hardwiring of the male brain that makes us just slightly less capable in this arena?
I think you're being very kind by saying slightly less capable. I think we're a lot dumber in some of these things. Yes, of course, it's the way that we're hardwired. We're much more rough and tumble. We're not as nurturing.
There really is something about a sporting event that can summon a father's evil side. Look at hockey coach and dad Martin Tremblay during the post-game handshake ceremony. You look back and he scoops his leg. You do realize you're a grown man, right? The 13-year-old he tripped broke his wrist. Tremblay was banned from the league and sent to the grown-up penalty box, jail, for 15 days. I think this peaks the bad dad meter into bad human. Well into bad human at this point, overall. It gets even darker than that. This surveillance video from a gas station in Detroit at 3 in the morning became a national story. Look closely at who's driving. A 9-year-old girl, her father in the passenger seat. Yeah, 9. She drove us there. It's awesome. I have such a system. Is that camera on? The surveillance video went viral, and the dad, Sean Weimer, went to court, where he was sentenced to 2 years probation. If you're that stupid, I want you caught on tape. Speaking of punishment, remember this dad? Tommy Jordan made a huge splash, even getting interviewed on 2020, after he decided to take his daughter to task for an anti-parent rant she posted on Facebook.
When your parents tell you to do something, you do it. You don't go, God, fine.
In retaliation, he went Eastwood on her laptop. The only lesson this taught this guy's daughter was dad is a maniac, and I can't wait to move out. Dr. Gardere says this is the exact wrong way to punish your kid.
Good parenting would be all of that time and effort that he spent at making that video, spending that time instead sitting with his daughter, talking with her about her behavior.
Now we should say not all of the caught on tape moments involving dads are negative. Let's wrap this thing up with a clip from a father letting it all go. He has become known as the dancing dad on the internet. I think the dancing technique was spectacular. It served the purpose, and I stand by him 100%. In conclusion, in an era when more moms are working outside the home, more dads are stepping up. But as they do so, Our experts say the humiliation doled out by these viral clips should serve as a useful reminder.
So your bottom line message to dads on this Father's Day seems to be, don't be an idiot.
Don't be an idiot. Think about what you're doing. You're allowed to make mistakes, but for heaven's sakes, learn from your mistakes and try to be.
That's our program for
2 brutal killings, a massive manhunt, and it shocked the whole town.
The officers went to the 7th floor flat, saw this man holding a sawn-off shotgun. He went over the balcony and then dropped down floor by floor. The press in London called him Spider-Man.
On the night of January the 23rd, 1995, Lancashire police were called to a garage in Morecambe. What they discovered there could have been the scene from a horror film. The investigation into what turned out to be a brutal double murder and the ensuing manhunt for the killer would take the police all over the country. It was a case that the police and the people of Morecambe would never ever forget. In January 1995, Morecambe, a picturesque seaside town in Lancashire, was about to become front-page news when the dead body of a man was found. DCI Graham Gooch from Lancashire Constabulary was to lead what would become an unprecedented investigation.
On the night in question, I was the duty on-call senior investigating officer, but sound asleep in bed, and then about 2 o'clock in the morning, the phone went, which means something awful's happened somewhere. So took the call and they said they'd had a murder at Morecambe.
The officers had been faced with a gruesome scene at a garage on the Whiteland Industrial Estate. The dead body had been severely battered.
They tell you basically what's happened, and then you start thinking, what am I going to need? Where shall I rendezvous with the officers on the scene? And start the process rolling.
DCI Colin Mooney was appointed as Deputy Senior Investigating Officer on the case, an unusual one for this normally quiet holiday resort.
Morecambe's quite a low crime area to live in, particularly compared with other areas of Lancashire. It's got a great beach, and it's got the estuary. There's a famous walk across the Morecambe Bay, a guided walk.
It's not the big razzmatazz of Blackpool, no big rides and things like that, but it has its own lovely appeal. The Queen Mother once came to Morecambe and described Morecambe's view as a $65,000 view.
I would say Morecambe's probably one of the very safest places to live. It's sort of like a bit of a sleepy town. There's not really that much horrendous trouble, you know.
The wives of 49-year-old Tony Morocco and 29-year-old Paul Sandham had phoned the police, worried about their husbands, who had worked at the garage together and not returned home.
They were creatures of habit. They'd finish their work about 5 o'clock and go home. And this night, they hadn't. The officers went to the garage with the relatives, and it was locked. And then they found somebody who's got a key to come along and unlock it. So the premises were locked. And inside, then they'd found this scene of destruction. Clearly, it looked as though someone had been playing dodgems with the cars, and there was smashed office furniture, smashed cabinets. And on the floor was the body of Tony Morocco.
Tony's body, unfortunately, bore considerable marks of violence. It looked as though he'd been stabbed and that his head had suffered a number of blows from a blunt instrument.
Well, certainly the amount of violence used was far in excess of that was needed to actually bring about death. There was something very emphatic about it, almost as if the person was acting out, some sense of mission or getting revenge.
From his injuries, it was immediately clear to police that Tony Morocco had been brutally murdered on the premises of his own business. After pathologists had analysed the scene, his body was carefully removed, and along with crime scene investigators, DCI Gooch tried to figure out what had happened.
Left at the scene, there was a lot of blood there. There was a torque wrench, which had blood and traces of body on it and hair, so that appeared to be a fairly obvious murder weapon. And lots of other pieces, because garages are generally fairly messy places, so there's a lot of stuff to look at. But then here we had the feature of this car, this Toyota car, which had obviously crashed into the desk and into the cupboards. So clearly that was part of whatever had happened at the scene. So we knew that we have to do a lot more investigation into that. But of course, the first thing on your mind is, who did this?
The police didn't have to look far for their first suspect.
The situation we had was there are these two men who worked together in the garage. They hadn't come home. We've been along there and we found the body of one of them and the other man's missing. It's not unreasonable to have some suspicion that they'd fallen out and had a terrible argument and that this was the result of it. Because, I mean, Paul Sandham was nowhere to be found. He hadn't gone home, which was most unusual.
The police immediately focused on locating Paul Sandham.
Officers have been called out to come to Morecambe to start forming an investigation team. In the morning, those officers had turned up about 8, 9 o'clock, and we'd started the briefing, painting the scene for them to tell them what was going on, what we were going to do, and what each of them would be doing. And then, during that briefing, in came one of the officers saying, "Hang on, boss, I think there's been a development," and hands me a piece of paper saying the body's been found further just out in the countryside, a little way from Morecambe. And then we found out that that was Paul Sandham, who had been stabbed many, many times.
The man police had been treating as a suspect had been left for dead with 41 knife wounds.
There was a clear connection between the two victims, and also the level of violence used on both of them was quite similar. It did bring into focus the fact that there had been a deliberate separation of the two victims, which of course highlighted just how calculated it was.
At this point, then, we realised that we had a double murder on our hands. It was inconceivable that two people who worked so closely together, who went missing at about the same time, and both found murdered, would not be linked.
I've dealt with murders before with more than one victim. They don't come very often, but it does change things completely from what we were looking at before. Before we were looking for possibly a murder with a reasonable suspect. Now suddenly you've got a double murder with no suspect. And it was a great concern to local people.
I spent most of my working life on the estate, from being the age of 13. You know, I got to know Tony, just through, being on the estate like I got to know everybody else. He was a lovely guy. If anybody was going to say, put Tony in a room of 10 other people, who would get murdered, you wouldn't put Tony, you'd say, what's he doing here? It was that shocking that, it was just beyond belief, really.
The local press, the local radio, everybody was covering this big stuff, which was very helpful, because it was a big story.
We've got here 2 brutal killings, a massive manhunt, something the like of which Morecambe had never seen before. And we were in the centre of it, being the town's newspaper, and we were swept up by it, and without a doubt we realised the enormity of the story, and that we had to rise to this challenge.
Lancashire police had 2 dead bodies on their hands, and no idea who could have committed the murders. The most dramatic investigation they had ever been faced with was about to commence. Police in Morecambe were dealing with a brutal double murder, and no suspect. The body of Tony Morocco had been found at his garage business, and his co-worker Paul Sandham was found a mile down the road in a field. He'd been stabbed 41 times.
When people learned of what had happened to Tony and Paul, it was just pure shock. Or anybody on the estate could quite believe what had happened. It was unreal, just unreal.
Tony Morocco was very well known. He had a wide circle of friends and a big customer base. His partner Paul probably was lesser well known, but he'd obviously known to all the customers.
Sad thing for Paul. Paul had just recovered from cancer. Had gone through a grueling time with that. To have his life pulled away from him in one flash, it was absolutely shocking.
After speaking to friends and family, police started investigating Tony's business, hoping to find a clue that would lead them to the murderer.
The kind of work that Tony was involved in, the purchase and sale of low-value vehicles, indicated to us that it was largely cash business, but there was no cash found on the body. So we did some checks, and we were right that there should have been some cash there. It looked like a robbery might have been the motive. In addition to that, Mrs. Morocco was able to tell us that Tony had a heavy gold chain around his neck, which he never took off, I think for sentimental reasons, except for just one occasion when he broken a link and it was repaired by a local jeweller, and that was missing.
Armed with their evidence, police began building a picture of what could have happened on that fateful night.
It became apparent to us that Paul Sandham had been taken away and murdered first. We guessed that this Toyota car had been used to take him away, presumably on a test drive, and he killed him in the field and then come back in the Toyota and crashed it into the garage when he arrived. We tend to assume that he'd gone along there, found two members of staff there, which he thought he couldn't overcome them, so on the pretext of wanting to buy a car, had got Paul Sandham away and killed him so he could go back and rob Tony.
Regardless of their theory, police still needed concrete evidence that the murders were linked and the Toyota car was significant.
It's very important to isolate the two scenes, make sure there's no contamination, because we wanted to find out if that car had been in the field. So we found, next to the road, we got a tyre track, which eventually found matched the Toyota, but also, more importantly, we found soil of identical makeup in the footwell of the car as was in the entrance to the field. Now, the important thing was this was found on the driver's side and not the passenger side. It showed only one person who had been out of the car got back into it, and that was the driver, and that had gone back to TM Motors.
For me, more significantly, there was a trainer mark in mud in the field close to Paul Sandham's body. And there was also a similar trainer mark in blood in TM Motors. So it was clear to us that the murders were linked, and they feel the trainer mark was a definite scientific link between those two murders.
With the crashed Toyota car left at the garage, police needed to establish how the killer had travelled around.
One of the lines of inquiry which we had was to try to establish whether or not there was a getaway vehicle involved and whether or not anybody had seen it. The only thing that we could find out was that somebody dimly recalled seeing a pedal cycle propped up against the wall outside TM Motors. And to be honest, I don't think that the police put a great deal of store by that at the time, because who goes to commit murder on a pedal cycle?
One of the members of staff of the garage who worked there part-time came in to help us, and he checked to see that all the cars were there, and he found there was one missing. And this was a white MG Metro, which was probably the best of the bunch of cars that were in the garage, and that one was missing. Not only was the car missing, but also the paperwork, the logbook, and the receipts and that for the vehicle. So clearly the murderer had not only just taken the car as a getaway, he also made sure he got all the documents for it. So clearly he probably intended to move the car on later, and that was important to us. I mean, it tells you a lot about the person you're looking for. That this isn't somebody who's just done something on the spur of the moment. The fact that he's lured one man away to kill him just so he can go back and do a petty robbery shows this is a dangerous and determined person.
DCI Gooch had another suspicion about the murderer's connection to the crime scene.
Did he know the garage? Had he been there before? You take the idea, he wouldn't have come from a million miles away. It's fairly tucked away on the White Lund estate. It's something somebody local would have known, or somebody who knew the area very well. You wouldn't have just turned up there from a long way away and gone there on spec.
With the white Metro missing, they now had a vehicle to look out for. The car was placed on the police national computer as a vehicle of interest, and also flagged with other relevant organisations.
There is an organisation which members of the public and car dealers can use to check whether or not a vehicle is stolen. We contacted that organisation and asked that if anybody checks that vehicle with them, that they should tell us, but not tell them.
So, having put a marker for the MG Metro onto HPI, only a couple of days later, they called us to say that someone had gone into a garage in Erith in South East London to sell the car.
The hire purchase information alert was an important breakthrough, but this meant geographically the investigation had to expand 275 miles down south.
Very quickly, we sent a team down to London to check this out. And the man in the garage did a few second-hand cars, he did repairs and lower end of the market sort of cars. And he remembered the man who had taken it in because he'd done a few deals with him before. And he checked it and there was nothing outstanding at HPI at that time. So a deal was done and he part-exchanged it for a Ford Escort.
The Erith car dealer provided an accurate description of the man that had sold him the white Metro, but wasn't much more help to the police as the suspect had covered his tracks.
He'd given false particulars, which gave us something to look at, but essentially it looked like a bit of a dead end. We didn't have any more information to go on then.
Unfortunately, and perhaps alarmingly, the car dealer had traded on the MG Metro, but luckily for us, he knew where it was, and we were able to catch up with the vehicle pretty soon thereafter. And so we seized it, we brought it back to Lancashire, and had it examined by our scientific officers. They found traces of blood on the driver's door handle, and it would have been reasonable to expect that it was either Mr. Morocco or Mr. Sandham's, but it wasn't. This was the blood of a third person. And we began to speculate that perhaps in the frenzied attack on the two deceased, maybe, just maybe, the murderer had cut himself, and that this was in fact the murderer's blood.
It was looking like a DNA breakthrough. All police needed was a match.
Another important element that came in then was the car that he'd bought from the dealer in Erith, because we had the registration number for that. And then we found, by putting that on the police national computer, we found the car had been stopped in the City of London. Now, what was happening at that time, there was anti-terrorist procedures. Now, the officer who stopped him couldn't actually remember it, but we knew it was near one of the CCTVs that was part of what they call the Ring of Steel around the City of London at the time. Now, when we got that film back, there was the car with a man driving it. Now, the pictures were a bit fuzzy, not good enough to identify, but we noticed that the hand on the steering wheel appeared to be bandaged.
Using the description supplied by the Erith car dealer, the police released a sketch of the suspect to the national press, hoping it might trigger more leads.
After we'd released the artist impression, I got a phone call in the major incident room from a detective from the Kent Constabulary. And he told me quite definitively, "Here, Gov, I think I know who did your murders." And the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This sounded like a breakthrough.
There appeared to be a link with a man who'd been robbing jewellery shops in Kent.
There was some CCTV footage of one of the robberies where the offender was particularly and gratuitously violent towards the shop assistant, punching her in the face when there's absolutely no need to do that. DC Cullen was one of the officers involved in that investigation. He told me that he thought the person responsible for our murders was a man by the name of Terence Derek Clifton.
Clifton was a suspect in the robberies, and having seen the artist's impression of the man Lancashire police were trying to track down, DC Cullen had thought the resemblance uncanny.
We did some quick checks on the name and the date of birth provided to us by Dick Cullen, and I was delighted to find that Clifton had a conviction in Lancashire, but not just Lancashire, Morecambe. This clearly made a connection between a man who lived in the South East London area and sleepy old Morecambe in Lancashire.
I think when the link was made with the earlier crimes, the robberies of the jewellers, for example, it became apparent that this was an individual who was on the fringes of society, who seemed to see himself as outside the law. Somebody who was very much playing by his own rules, maybe with his own sense of purpose.
Armed with their new evidence, the police moved quickly. The hunt was on for Terry Clifton. For a double killer, Lancashire police had identified a prime suspect. All they needed to do now is find him. Intelligence pointed to a man called Terence Clifton for the murders of Tony Morocco and Paul Sandham. But they were yet to track Clifton down, and still needed evidence that placed him at the scene of the crime.
Now, one of the important things is on Tony Morocco's body, there was an awful lot of blood. And when they looked at his trousers, they'd taken blood samples from about 6 sites, which is the normal thing to do. And they'd all been the same blood group, and they'd all been Tony's blood. However, they went back to it then and looked inside the pocket where his money would have been. And inside the pocket, another blood sample was taken, and that turned out that that wasn't Tony's. So suddenly, here we had the blood sample from the murderer, we thought. So now the case is really building up. We've got this suggested name from the intelligence officer in Kent. We've got a description that would appear to be matched. And now we've got blood from the murderer in the pocket of the deceased. So now we've got to match it.
Clifton had been in prison before, but this was 1995, when personal profile details held on convicts were limited.
Nowadays it's quite routine for people coming into custody to have a mouth swab taken with a view to having their DNA recorded on the National DNA Database, but that wasn't the case way back then. And so what we needed was a sample of Clifton's blood to compare with the blood of the third person from the crime scenes and from the MG Metro.
The investigation was now a nationwide search, and Lancashire Police gathered as much support as they could without naming their suspect.
We always enjoyed a pretty good relationship with the police, and on this particular incident, it was outstanding, because partly the police needed us as well to help catch the eye.
We decided to release the artist's impressions to the local paper. And that brought about another development. A young lady came to the police station and she said that based on the artist's impression, she thought that the person that we were looking for was none other than Terence Clifton. She explained that Terence had attended school in the area and, significantly, that he had been in the Morecambe area around the Christmas New Year period of 1995. The witness went on to say that Clifton had arrived in the area in a big old BMW car that he'd driven up from London, but that he had sold it and bought another car locally. And it came as no surprise that transaction took place at T&M Motors. In fact, the BMW was still lying in the yard at T&M when we went to check.
He'd gone to trade this old car in, and he wasn't happy that Tony had only given him a couple £100 for it or something like that. And then he wanted money because there was petrol in the tank. And Tony took out his big wad of money and peeled off a fiver, and there's a fiver for the petrol. And he very much resented that.
The police now had an additional motive for the murders: revenge.
So the woman who went into Morecambe Police Station to say she'd seen Clifton and knew him was able to tell us that he stayed with a family in Morecambe the night before the murders. And when we saw them, they were able to tell us, yes, he'd stayed there the night before.
The people that Clifton had been staying with were also able to say that one day he came out onto the street where his car was parked to find that the tyres had been slashed, and he was extremely annoyed. He turned to his schoolmate, the person he'd been stopping with, and asked to borrow his pedal cycle, saying that he was going to go down to the Whiteland estate where he knew a couple of blokes who were going to sort him out a motor. This, of course, explained why no car was seen at T&M Motors, and explained the presence of a pedal cycle propped up against the door at the relevant time. A little while later, Clifton appeared back at the family home. Then he was driving a white hatchback car, and the pedal cycle belonging to the young man with whom he'd been staying was sticking out the back. So he returned the pedal cycle and set off, saying that he was bound back for London.
Police confiscated the bike for forensic testing, where blood was found that matched that on the white Metro and in Tony Morocco's pocket. But they couldn't connect this blood to their suspect.
So we obviously waiting for a DNA match to see whether or not we could definitively tie that blood to Terence Derek Clifton, but at that stage we didn't have it.
The police could only get the blood test they needed if they were able to arrest Clifton.
We'd already had officers down in London after the initial call, but now we sent more of a team down there to try to find him. And it was becoming very difficult. He certainly didn't make it easy for us. He was changing cars almost daily. And then he was moving from place to place where he was staying. And we always seemed to be a bit behind him.
I get a sense of a continuing theme of him versus the world. And seeing himself as this character, almost a heroic character who can rise above adversity and demonstrate, in some respects, a superiority, give the police the runaround and get away with pretty much what he chooses.
When it was a bit of a manhunt to London, but then you think, Jesus, help me catch him. Everybody was sort of like shocked and look, you know, it was very hard for everybody. I mean, you know, it's all right for me to sit here saying it was hard. You imagine what his family felt like.
At this point, Lancashire Constabulary had officers at a police station in Bexley Heath in Kent, and they also had backup from the Metropolitan Police.
The murder investigation was turning into a manhunt. He was giving an alias, but there's a common theme to those aliases.
Whilst he was going around giving people false names and addresses to people who didn't know him, there were clues in it for us, because a lot of the names he was given were sort of mix and match of places he'd lived before and people who he had known or relatives. At one of the addresses at which he'd stayed, we found a gold Belcher chain which he'd swapped for some cannabis. And we were able to take that to a jeweler in Lancaster who had repaired it, and he was able to identify it as being the chain he'd repaired for Tony Morocco.
Then the manhunt suddenly turned a corner, when on the 27th of February 1995, 1 month into the investigation, police pursued a lead in Erith in Kent.
Well, the officers went to the 7th floor flat of one of Clifton's ex-girlfriends, because we had reason to suspect he was there. So as they were going through the front door, the officer who was down on the ground saw Clifton backing out of the flat, holding a sawn-off shotgun, pointing in towards the flat. So we've now gone up a stage because he's armed and we know he's dangerous. But then he put the gun down and went over the balcony and then dropped down floor by floor. He just let go on each floor and dropped, and then just grabbed the railing of the flat below to slow himself down. And he did that all the way down to the ground, and then he ran off. After that, the press in London called him Spider-Man, and that was it.
I think part of my feelings at the time was I wish he'd fell off that tower block halfway down. You know, the man was a psychopath.
The police recovered the discarded shotgun, but now knew Clifton had access to firearms. He was now a huge danger to the public, and he was on the run.
Then we took the unusual step of publicising his name. Normally you don't publish the names of suspects until somebody's charged. But with this man on the loose and being so dangerous, we had to do that in the hope that people would come forward and tell us where he is, because nobody wants him on the loose in their community, because if he can do this sort of thing, he might do the same to them.
It was unnerving because the sheer brutality of it kept people on edge. They'd never known anything like it before. Somebody capable of doing that was capable of doing anything.
2 grieving families, a community on guard, and an armed killer. It was more urgent than ever. The police were closing in on Terence Clifton, who they believed had killed Tony Morocco and Paul Sandham in cold blood.
The London team had been chasing down the long chain of cars that Clifton had been buying and selling on, and they were hot on the trail of one particular car when they identified it parked up in a street. So the Metropolitan Police firearms team and Lancashire officers kept a watch on the car, and a man came to the car and got in. He was immediately surrounded by the armed officers and was arrested at gunpoint. Unfortunately, it wasn't Clifton. It was, however, a man who'd bought the car Clifton only a number of hours previously. And once he'd been dusted down, he was able to tell us that, and to tell us the car that Clifton had bought off him. We were now only hours behind our suspect.
Clifton was reported to be driving an Austin Montego.
Now, in possession of the information that he was in the Montego motor car, there were a number of officers plotted up in the area, and then 2 officers saw him get into the car, and then he went round and parked up in Finstead Road. It was called in, and the armed team then went in, and he was arrested. He surrendered straight away.
Finally, they'd got Clifton. Arrested at gunpoint on the 6th of March 1995, 6 weeks after the murders.
We had him now. And so it's a great relief that this man's no longer on the streets. He's a very dangerous man, and he's now locked up. So that was a huge relief. But then, you see, the job from my end of things particularly is really just starting, because now you've got to put all that evidence together to turn it into a case of admissible evidence.
When news of the arrest came through, it came as a relief to us, and I think also to our readers and obviously the families, that we were able to print the fact that finally this person the police have been looking for so long, and who had been involved in so many escape dramas, had finally been arrested, and that we were getting somewhere.
Police needed to prove that blood found on the stolen white Metro, the push bike connected to the crime, and in Tony Morocco's pocket, belonged to Clifton. They took DNA swabs from him and awaited the results.
Yes, having been arrested down in London, then obviously he had to be brought up to Lancaster, where he was held, and we questioned him, and he thought he could be cleverer than us, if you like, because he was told briefly what the evidence was. And he said he happened to be walking through the White London Industrial Estate, like you do, and he'd seen this car parked at the roadside, the white Metro, with the keys in it and all the documents lying on the seat. And he just intended to steal the car. And that was his defence.
He was rational, he was polite, he admitted the theft of the MG Metro, but claimed that he had nothing to do whatsoever with the murders. So, following the interviews, we decided we were going to charge him, notwithstanding the fact that we didn't have the DNA evidence at that stage. We did feel that we had sufficient evidence to charge, and we did.
Clifton was remanded in custody while he awaited trial, and several weeks later the results of his DNA swab came through, which, as police suspected, was a match with DNA evidence from the double murder.
We had this man with a history of extreme violence. We had a man who knew the area, despite the fact he had a London address. He'd been to school in Morecambe. He was known to be in the area. He'd borrowed a bicycle to go to the garage and had come back later with the white Metro, with the bicycle in it, with blood on it, which was his blood. Then we had his blood in Tony Morocco's pocket at the scene. We then had footprints at the scene of that murder and at the scene of Paul Sandham's murder. We could link the 2 scenes again because of the earth from the field and the earth in the driver's footwell of the Toyota that Clifton had then driven back to the garage. We've got the Belcher chain that was found in London that he'd swapped for some cannabis, which we could then identify positively as being Tony Morocco's. So we got an awful lot of evidence to make a case for the prosecution.
So in the next few months, Clifton made a number of appearances both at the Crown Court and at the Magistrates' Court as part of the process leading towards his eventual trial. His behaviour had deteriorated from that at the time of his interview. He assaulted a prison officer on one occasion and blew raspberries at the judge on another occasion.
On Saturday, the 24th of June 1995, Clifton was due to be formally committed for trial at Lancashire Magistrates' Court.
And then we came to the worst of all, his behaviour. He said he wanted private consultation with his solicitor, which he's entitled. So he was taken into a room with his solicitor. Then he produced a sharpened telescopic car aerial, which he'd secreted within his rectum before he left prison, and then held this against his solicitor's throat and threatened him and took him hostage.
We called in a hostage negotiator, and we also called in officers who were trained to put an end to a siege like this by more forceful lawful means.
I remember getting a call from a colleague at quite an early hour of the morning to say that there was an incident in progress at Lancaster Magistrates Court. At that time, I worked for the prison service, and I was on call for hostage negotiation situations.
Dr. Need made his way to the court, while Lancashire police tried to manage the situation as best they could.
As part of this, he called for an imam to come and speak to him, claiming that he was a convert to Islam, and the imam duly came and spoke to him and declared that, in his opinion, he wasn't a convert.
When I arrived, everybody was rather tired, but above all, I think, attention focused on the well-being of the hostage.
The siege itself, from the time it took him, lasted for some 21 hours. So it's gone on a long time. And of course, when you're dealing with somebody like that, who's not that well balanced and clearly dangerous, as time goes on, they're getting tired. And either they give up or they can get worse and worse. At the end, things were getting worse. And that's why there had to be a rapid intervention.
It was decided that we should explore the possibility of tactical intervention, and that really centred upon separating Clifton from the hostage. And that was achieved by offering Clifton a cup of coffee, which he accepted, took a few steps over to reach for it, and at that point the door to the room burst open and several gentlemen jumped on it. So it was brought to a peaceful resolution.
It was erratic behaviour, and it may have been just part of the delaying tactics. I'm not sure what he felt that he had to gain by taking his solicitor hostage. It seemed to me to be the last turn of the card of an increasingly desperate man.
Clifton's troublemaking continued. He sacked his defence lawyer and told police he would represent himself. The trial at Preston Crown Court didn't happen for 2 years.
So eventually he came up for trial in January of 1997. And then when it came to the day of trial, he refused to come out of the cell and face his own trial.
Because Clifton was unrepresented, it meant that the witnesses were not cross-examined, although the judge maintained the impartiality of the trial by asking pertinent questions of the witnesses himself. But nonetheless, the pace of the trial was much quicker than you would normally expect, and I recall that on one occasion, in excess of 30 witnesses in one day were heard.
At the trial, the injuries sustained by Tony Rocker were so bad, it took the pathologist like 45 minutes just to describe the injuries, and the family sat through all that.
The jury didn't take a long time at all to convict him of the murders. In a matter of 40 minutes or so, they'd returned unanimous verdicts of guilty to 2 offences of murder and 1 of the theft of the white MG car.
All that was left was to sentence Clifton for his horrific crimes.
The judge insisted quite rightly he'd be brought up for sentencing, and he wasn't for going quietly. And it took 9 prison officers a long time, having to have him wrap him in sheets to stop him kicking and punching and fighting the officers, and they carried him up to the dock where he heard the sentence. He was sentenced to life imprisonment twice over for each of the murders, and 4 years for stealing the car. The family who'd sat throughout the trial listened to the dreadful things that happened to their relatives, and I think they were very relieved at the outcome of the trial and the fact that he was going away, hopefully forever.
It was the most shocking and demanding investigation Lancashire police had ever seen, but finally it had come to an end.
The chain of events, working backwards from the siege to the escape from the balcony, the fact that it was a double murder, the fact that it was a manhunt, I just don't think that anybody could have written a credible script that could have fitted our scenario.
We knew we weren't far away, and we knew if we kept going, then eventually we'd get him, and we did.
After 3 months playing cat and mouse with the police, a sensational escape and a hostage situation, Terry Clifton would be an old man if and when he was ever released.
My father was a tireless advocate for the law. He was a criminal prosecutor. Some say ruthless, others say righteous. Yeah, cut from the same cloth. I can't really remember who I was before I became a cop. It's my job to make bad things happen to bad people.
She did not want to go to work that night. We did not walk the streets at night. We all knew as soon as Jackie didn't come home that something was wrong. The overpass was Jackie's last walk. Jackie deserves that someone be held accountable for this. Every time I come here, I recall Jackie's last walk. My mother was devastated. All that she wanted to do was look for Jackie's killer. We would follow any tips. We kept hoping and looking. Someone decided to end Jackie's life and take her away from us.
How has it been for you, this experience, losing Jackie?
I've lost other people in my life, from illnesses, old age, and you can intellectually process it while you're grieving. In Jackie's case, you can't. The grieving has been done, but there are no answers.
Having something hanging for so many years and not knowing the answer, I would think it wears you down a bit because you've lost something so precious so early.
I don't know if there's such a thing as closure, but I know for me that I would rather know who's responsible than live all my life not trying to find answers. When I met with police last year, I had 3 requests, one of them being if Jackie's diary could be returned to us. That's the only thing I have, and I'm willing to offer it. That would help.
It will help. We will take that, thank you. The exhibit tag shows 1969, October 4th, at 15 minutes after 10 o'clock p.m. That may have been the last time it was looked at. Having the diary in my hand as an artifact of Jackie's short life hammers home the importance of what we're doing here. With your blessing, we would like to bring this case back into the light.
I believe it is solvable.
Being from London, I always knew about this case. Everyone here has a personal connection to the case and should be angered that it's still open. I've been a cop and a professor of criminology for years, and I've used that experience to assemble a squad of civilian subject matter experts. They must approach each case completely unbiased, to not box themselves into conventional thinking, to bring fresh eyes and new technologies to the table. Their job, and mine, is to investigate the coldest of cold cases, the murders that time forgot. Jacqueline English, case number 69-52, the 52nd murder in the province in 1969. October 4th, 1969, approximately 5 p.m. Jacqueline, or Jackie as she was known, attends her place of work here. The Metropolitan store located in the Treasure Island Plaza was then a rural area outside the City of London. Jackie was a waitress at the Metropolitan store. 10:15 p.m., Jackie is seen leaving the store, walking over the overpass on Wellington Road. 2 witnesses describe Jackie as getting into a 4-door sedan. That's the last time Jackie is seen alive. 4 days later, the nude body of Jackie English is discovered floating in the water of the Big Otter Creek near the town of Tilsonburg, almost an hour outside the City of London. No clothing on the body, even her earrings have been removed. It's determined that Jackie died from a single severe blow to the head.
Young girls like Jacqueline, to have her life cut short in such a violent and atrocious manner, it's horrifying.
I have a 14-year-old daughter. Just disturbing as a parent, it's evil.
The fact that it was so long ago and it hasn't been resolved, and the fact that only Anne is left, the sister, the length of the not knowing it's tragic.
A number of Jackie's belongings, including torn pieces of her clothing, are found approximately 10 miles from where the body was dumped. A pair of brown penny loafers she was seen wearing as she was walking home were found 10 miles from where the other clothing was discarded. A witness comes forward, a woman named Betty Harrison. She tells the police she saw Jackie speaking with a customer inside the Metropolitan store, a man she describes as having made Jackie look uneasy. She provides police with a description that allows them to create this composite drawing. Ms. Harrison begins to receive threatening phone calls, telling her she should not have gone to the police. In subsequent days, she receives a sympathy card in the mail. The only inscription on the card is the statement, "We will be watching you."
It also indicates to me that the perpetrator, they're very connected to the media. There seems to be almost an aspect of performance.
Absolutely. About a month later, Ms. Harrison is ambushed by a man with a knife and confined in her car while he cuts her face upwards of 27 times.
The attack on Mrs. Harrison seems very theatrical. If her attacker was legitimately concerned with being connected to Jackie's murder, why wouldn't he just kill her? Was Ms. Harrison able to describe her attacker, and did it match the composite?
Not very well. It was dark, and given the brutality of the attack, she didn't get a good look.
Miss Harrison is still alive and willing to talk to us.
She's dead.
She's dead. It would have been very helpful to be able to speak to somebody who saw something at the time.
So far, the squad is asking all the right questions. They're looking for a way into this case, and that's exactly what I want to see from them. Other questions that connect to the evidence.
Was Jackie sexually assaulted?
No obvious sign of sexual assault other than her body being stripped nude, her clothes being found torn.
No defensive wounds?
No defensive wounds. Her boyfriend at the time voluntarily provided a sample for comparison to the DNA at the scene because it was thought that the sample may have been from when they had consensual sex earlier on the 4th.
What was the boyfriend doing on the night of the 4th?
In the notes that I've received, and I'll share with you, there's a detailed statement taken from the boyfriend. He has an alibi.
Okay.
It's just weird that there wasn't necessarily a lot of trauma to her body, but the person who was threatened afterwards with the knife, there was substantial violence.
So is it the same person? Is it a copycat? We know that there's a number of unsolved sex slayings in London at the time.
Mike and I met with the sister who had mentioned that this person named Marilyn Hurd, a friend of Jackie's. After Jackie died, Marilyn tried to commit suicide. Marilyn had a picture of Jackie, and on the back of this picture it said, "The name of the killer will remain with me."
Antonella's revelation raises a lot of questions for me about Marilyn, who she is, and what else she knows about the circumstances about Jackie's death.
It could be huge. It could break the case if we can get her to come clean and talk to us.
What do you want to do with this?
I'd like to go to where the body was dumped. I think it'd be useful to map all of the different locations, because if we have the point where she was abducted, where the body and other clothing was dumped, it might give us a useful radius to start plotting persons of interest.
I like where you're going with that. Geographic profile is key in this case. Peter?
I'd like to get a look at as much archival data as possible and map it.
Maybe pair up with someone who then can look at similar cases.
Mike, you mentioned that there's a lot of sex slayings in London, so I'd be interested in looking into those cases, public forums, that kind of thing.
Antonella?
I want to look at the diary, first of all. I want to see what's in the diary. I want to see what she thought, what she did.
Auntie?
Marilyn, you'd have to go and try and talk to Marilyn.
Find her. There's still an element of danger to this case. Be mindful of who we're dealing with here. Stay vigilant. All right, let's go. Jackie's murder is a very complicated case, and it will push this squad to its limits. Not only do we have to unearth old facts, we need to uncover new information.
40 years is a long time for a case to be cold. I don't know whether or not Marilyn Hurd is alive, but somebody has to remember her.
Jackie English was last seen alive on the night of October 4th, 1969, when she was on her way home from work. Her body was discovered in a creek days later, over 40 miles from where she was last seen. Her Her clothes and shoes were then found miles from where her body was located. I need Antonella to look at our victim. I need her to help us understand who Jackie was. Why is it that she got in the car that night? Who was driving? Was it someone she knew, someone from her inner circle of friend and acquaintance, or someone from an outer perimeter, someone who had seen her before, and when they saw her walking that overpass, saw an opportunity and took it?
I came in this evening to really focus on reading Jackie's diary. I'm interested to see what Jackie was thinking at the time, what was going on in her life. There are thoughts, there are reflections that she's experiencing. I want to get to that. As a psychotherapist, you have to read more than what's actually there. After reading the diary several times, I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text. Cracking this code might be key in helping us in this investigation.
I've just got a call about some files and some personal diaries that belong to a detective who worked this case in the late 60s. I'm hoping that there's something buried in those files that will light a fire under this case.
Dennis?
Oh, Mike.
Nice to meet you.
I found some interesting information. My father passed away, and he was a detective sergeant in this area. He spent a lot of time on this Jackie English case. And there's the diaries. I also found in his basement some files. And you see these diaries. They tell what he did, who he met. Jackie English bothered him all his life because it never did come to resolution.
This is a great gift. This is really remarkable. I've never seen anything like this. This original detective was so focused, so haunted by this case, that he duplicated all of his notes and then made secondary copies of some of his key files, boxed them up, and he kept them as a time capsule in his house. One day he hoped that someone could carry on his work, and new technology would provide new momentum for his hunches that he could never follow up on, and that no one would listen to him about. I just found something interesting in the notes from the original investigation. It turns out that Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, who attempted suicide in the days after Jackie's death, changed her version of events about what happened that October night, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Hi, Ann, it's Mike. I'd like to come talk to you. I'm just following up on some new information. It's about somebody you know. One of the nagging questions in this case is the behavior of Marilyn Hurd. What is the secret, do you think, that she has?
I think Marilyn knows exactly what happened to Jackie. Marilyn has directed everybody in a million different ways, but Marilyn always was saving the ending for another day. Marilyn's mind has covered it up, or she's deliberately not sharing that with us.
Your sister's murder touched off this behavior?
Yes.
This botched suicide attempt.
I believe Marilyn holds the key, and something happened the Friday night. He's related. He was starting his career as a criminal very early on.
Do you know if he was out of jail at the time of Jackie's murder?
I have no idea if in jail or...
We may be looking at someone who's fallen between the cracks. We need to look further into Marilyn's relatives, specifically his criminal background, if this is the person that Marilyn is protecting. The best indicator of future behavior is past behavior, so I want to know what he was up to at the time, and whether or not he would have had motive and opportunity to abduct and murder Jackie.
Right now I'm up to trying to find Marilyn Hurd, but I haven't had any luck looking for her on the computer, so I'm gonna go old school. She's not listed in any current listing, but maybe a few years ago or 10 years ago, she had an address. There's definitely some phone numbers here for me to look into. If Marilyn Hurd is alive and in London, I'll find her.
The squad is investigating the murder of Jackie English, who was murdered on her way home from a part-time job in October 1969. Suffice it to say, after 40 years, the trail is very cold. Antonella is looking through Jackie's old diary to see if there's something in there that can help the squad out.
I noticed that there could be some code embedded in the text.
In addition to that, Peter and Renee are conducting a geoprofiling experiment, looking at other cases that may be related to Jackie's.
Geographic profiling is a way of taking into account multiple crimes in a crime series, and we're applying Rosmer's formula to the case of Jackie English because we have multiple data points to work with here. Rosmer's formula is a mathematical equation designed to find the most likely residence of a serial killer based on his crimes.
Rosmer's formula is currently the gold standard in terms of geoprofiling. It helped net Canada's worst serial killer, Robert Pickton, developed by an academic police officer like me.
I started my geographic profile with only one point, Jackie English's home at the time when she was killed.
The distance between the Metropolitan Store, the highway, and London city limit remain unchanged, and those variables will all be important factors to incorporate into the geographic profile that Peter's constructing. Right now, we're at the site where Jackie's body was discovered in Big Otter Creek, and I'm interested in examining the landscape around the bridge and around the creek where she was found to see what other options the perpetrator may have had for disposing of her body. I find it hard to believe that if the body were dropped from this height into water that shallow, they wouldn't show any signs of scraping the bottom. We can't assume that she was actually dropped from the bridge. Perhaps her body was carried down the bank and placed in the creek itself, which means that there could be some added significance to this body of water.
Renee's confirmed locations where Jackie was last seen alive and where Jackie's body was found. Renee's emailed me these coordinates, and I'm going to put them into my geographic profile and start to build a more complete picture. Dania's been researching murders that have occurred in and around the area where Jackie was killed. Once I get those details, I'll be able to put it all together and see if a pattern emerges indicating where the killer might have lived.
I'm intrigued why the perpetrator would have selected the bridge itself as a location to dispose of her body. It's a very conspicuous spot. It would indicate to me that the perpetrator wants the victim to be found.
When I was reading through Jackie English's diary, I discovered that certain parts of it were written in some sort of secret code.
Those are the encryptions that were in the diary. Do you think you could do anything with those?
I could really use Monty and Peter's help to help me crack it.
This E's got to represent either an I or an A, because those are the only two words in the English language that can be in a sentence and just be one letter.
We've got some double letters too, right? Like the double B at the beginning of the word.
What can that be? Llama?
Yeah.
Like what other word in the English language begins with a double letter? I can't think of one other than llama.
And we have is likely a substitution cipher, which means that every letter has been replaced by exactly one other letter, and that this scheme doesn't change or evolve.
If E equals I, let's say that's the case. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4.
Once we figure out what scheme Jackie used to encode this text, we can then proceed character by character.
Okay, got it. 1, 2. B equals L. 1, 2 in. If J equals D. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You follow?
Yeah, I think you got it. Yeah, so
L.
Lloyd, with the name Lloyd, fits that template.
When I checked into Jackie's background, I found out she had a boyfriend named David. When I checked into his background, I found out he had a brother named Rick. And Rick's middle name is Lloyd.
What's B gonna be?
R, right?
R. French. She missed a letter. Lloyd French kissed me.
Lloyd French.
Yeah. There's one down here as well. F. M was A, right?
Mm-hmm. I faked tears.
I faked tears.
That's what I got.
There's only 2 instances of that encryption, which for some reason she wanted to keep these 2 secret.
Lloyd French kissed me? This is unsettling. French kisses and fake tears? Who is this Lloyd? And could he somehow be connected to Jackie's murder?
Contained in the original file for Jackie English is a letter dating to 1978, 9 years after she was murdered. It's written by the brother of Jackie's boyfriend at the time of her murder. In this letter, Rick is seeking Dave's forgiveness for something horrible that he's done. The writer will not mention the event. Substitution words he uses include the burden, the sin, my sin. What he's referring to, I don't know. Could the brother Rick have had something to do with Jackie's murder? That's the question. The squad has been pushing hard to find the person or persons responsible for the murder of Jackie English. This is a group of civilians. Detective work is not in their usual wheelhouse. That said, so far I'm impressed with what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing. It's imperative that we track down Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, and look closer at her relative. I've been digging through some old police files, and I found an interesting letter between Jackie's boyfriend at the time and his brother. The content of that letter is strange, and it may have something to do with her murder. I'm recruiting the assistance of Dr. John Olson from the UK, arguably the world expert when it comes to forensic linguistics. He's been used by detectives all over Europe in cases where they need to analyze suicide letters, ransom letters, or confessions. In this case, I want him to get to the bottom of this concealed sin that's being referred to in this letter between the two brothers. If you'd just like to give me your take on the letter as it was given to you.
One of the first things that I look at when I look at a document of this nature is to see whether I can somehow get a picture of the relationship between the writer and the receiver.
I've removed the date, I've removed any reference to any specific person by name or by relationship, so he's looking at a blinded document.
Upon reading this, it is clear that any relationship between the writer and the receiver of these documents goes back a very long way. And yet, there is no love lost between us. That made me think of siblings. That we are dealing with siblings.
What, in your expert opinion, is it that the writer is talking about?
I think the word sinfulness really gives us the clue. It strongly suggests to me a sexual incident. The very fact that it's never made overt, this is a very common strategy used by people when talking about incidents of which they feel some kind of shame. There is a certain crypticness about it. This may be because the writer, it's just occurred to me, was perhaps in prison at the time, but even so, there is no indication here of a third party. This seems to be very much a matter, because of the intensity of it, between the writer and the receiver.
In your experience, is this thing that the writer is referring to a cryptic admission to a murder, in your opinion?
No, absolutely not. I think this is a private shame that we're dealing with rather than a public crime.
Dr. Olson, in analyzing this letter and knowing nothing else about this case, is satisfied that it's correspondence between two siblings and that it's in reference to some sexual incident and that it's not a confession to murder. In combing through the original lead detective's personal diaries and journals, I've noted that her boyfriend at the time, David, had an alibi and was immediately excluded as a suspect. That said, his brother Rick has some significant involvement with the law. In looking at what he's done, nothing comes close to the very specific MO and signature that we see in Jackie's murder. It's time we move on and explore other possibilities.
When Mike talked to Jackie's sister Anne, he found out that Marilyn Hurd's relative had some run-ins with the law. So I'm checking crime sites, social media sites, and any other records to see what I can come up with. See if there's any buzz about this guy still out there.
Dania has found some compelling information about Marilyn's relative that might prove key in moving this case forward. We have uncovered a very interesting development. Of course, we all know Marilyn Hurd. This botched suicide attempt in the weeks after Jackie's murder revealed that she had a photograph of Jackie in her pocket with some sort of cryptic, ominous message that she would take the secret of the killer to her grave. And who is it that Marilyn would be so willing to protect? And it turns out that Marilyn has a relative. And in he stabbed and slashed a boy playing on a lawn. He was later arrested, charged, and convicted in this attack. He was paroled or on full release just before Jackie's murder. we need to determine whether even Jackie ever made acquaintance. I was also able to obtain a high school class photograph. This is him here. Did he also slash Betty Harrison, the witness who provided with that composite description? If so, is he also more directly connected to Jackie's murder? So we're going to need to tighten this up. Renee, I want you to look further into what happened. And I want you to track down an expert in facial recognition who can overlay and compare this image from to the 1969 composite drawing. These are important finds with limited time remaining. Let's get at it. The missing piece of the puzzle continues to be Marilyn Hurt. Whatever it is she knows or thinks she knows is key here, so finding her is imperative.
Residential. Gotcha. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, it's Monty. How are you? Yeah, I found Marilyn Hurd. In London. I'll email it to you right now.
Finally, this is our opportunity to find out if Marilyn Hurd really knows something. Is she protecting her relative?
I know who they are.
Who are they? The squad is looking to help solve the 1969 murder of Jackie English. She was last seen getting into a car and then vanishing into the night. We already have one suspect. She had a relative who, just prior to Jackie's murder, was convicted of a serious assault. It seems as if she may be protecting him. Tell me how you knew Jackie.
We started working together at the Metropolitan store. We had to walk over the 401 overpass to get to the closest city bus stop.
Okay. I knew that if I was aggressive in my questioning, that she would probably shut down, the same as she did with Anne English. Now, what do you remember of the night she went missing?
I wasn't with her the night she went missing, but she gave me a call sometime after 1 o'clock in the afternoon to ask me if I would go with these two men that she knew. I said I wouldn't, and I warned her about going with them. I know who they are.
Who are they?
I can't.
In the weeks after Jackie's murder, a security guard downtown found you with a photo in your pocket of Jackie.
I took an overdose myself.
But you were found with Jackie's photo in your pocket, and there was an inscription on the back stating something like,
I knew who killed Jackie English.
And you take it to your grave. Who's that?
I was a big confidant back there. I never broke a secret. If someone told me something and asked me not to tell anybody, I wouldn't tell anybody.
It's always frustrating when a witness clams up and won't fork over the information needed to help break a case open. Sometimes it's because they're genuinely afraid. Sometimes it's because they think they're being loyal to some confidant. It's important that I find another method of discovering who exactly she's protecting. Did your relative know Jackie?
Not very well.
Had they met before?
I don't know.
Did he ever come to visit you at the store? Might he?
No.
No? Next stabbed a small child. Let's just cut to the chase.
That stabbed a small child. And I went to the jail and asked him why he was taking the
rap?
The rap. And he said he didn't think would survive delinquency school.
So when got out in 1969?
Okay, he got into trouble again, apparently. Right. And armed robbery, but I knew could never do that.
So let me get this straight. He didn't stab the child. Somebody else did. And this armed robbery, and he didn't do that either.
No.
But he took the rap for both.
He did.
Okay.
I've only ever told the truth as I remember it.
Do you still keep in touch with him?
No, I don't know where he's living or anything. I was too drugged up on psychiatric medication to keep tabs on him.
Over 40 years later, Marilyn Hurd is still protecting the identity of whoever it is she thinks killed Jackie English. The question is this an elaborate game she's playing, or has the trauma of Jackie's murder actually twisted her own memories to the point where she actually believes everything that she's saying and thinking? I'm also curious who they are. She keeps referring to them as they. This includes Marilyn's relative, and one or two or more other people, or different people entirely. We need to focus on cold hard facts and move this case forward, not conjecture or guesswork, or what Marilyn Hurd thinks she may know.
Renee and I have been working on a geographic profile for Jackie, plotting locations where she was last seen, where her body was discovered, and where her clothing was found. Meanwhile, Danny has been looking into similar crimes with comparable signatures to combine into a geographic profile. Our hope is that by cross-referencing all locations, we are able to pinpoint where the killer most likely lived.
So I sent you guys the spreadsheet on the London sex slings. Is there anything that you guys found in terms of patterns or commonalities?
There was one case,
right?
It occurred in 19... If you guys want to take a look at... The case bears some remarkable similarities to Jackie. So was last seen getting into a car. Her body, her clothes, and her shoes were all found scattered widely.
Wow.
And the most obvious similarity is that evidence from the case was found near the same gravel pit where Jackie's shoes were left.
The MO, the age, and circumstances.
Many commonalities between these two cases.
Yeah.
And even though it was solved, the conviction didn't occur until 1970. So the timeline also fits for Jackie's case.
Jackie was 69, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Are they still in jail? Were they free? It's kind of like an adrenaline rush, just realizing those connections.
What's this guy's name?
David.
Renee's fine with respect to this David character. I mean, this is really what this initiative is about. This is what open source investigations ideally yield, which is a match between where Jackie's shoes were dumped and where David's victim was also dumped. That can't be dismissed as a coincidence. Peter, how'd you make out with Rossmo's formula in your geographic profile?
Pretty well. So let me just throw it up on the smartboard here. Rossmo's formula is a mathematical equation designed to determine where a serial killer lives. If we assume that one serial killer was responsible for Jackie's murder as well as the other murders in the same place and time that we've discovered, then Rossmo's formula allows us to pool the locations of these multiple murders and more accurately determine where the serial killer lived.
So we've got place last seen for Jacqueline English, the various locations where her clothing was found, where her body was located. We've got the location of attack on witness Betty Harrison. We've got home address at the time. All of this seems to be surrounding this red center. Explain the significance of that.
So here, overlaid on the map of London and surrounding towns, is the most likely location of who killed Jackie English. The highest probability is marked by this red oval. And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
David lived in the same town, and the formula indicates that in the Jackie English case, that town is the most likely home base for the killer. So we're going to need to tighten this up. We've still got a lot of work to do. We still need to determine if we should be looking at Marilyn's relative that's potentially being involved in Jackie's murder. But it's also important to take a hard look at this David, find out what involvement he might have had. It's time to start nailing this case down. This civilian squad has done a fantastic job unearthing new information about the unsolved murder of Jackie English. Already at this point in our investigation, we have several persons of interest. As it turns out, Jackie's co-worker, Marilyn Hurd, had a relative who was convicted of a serious assault just prior to Jackie's murder. But it's also important to take a hard look at this David fellow, find out what he was up to, find out what involvement he might have had. Thus far, the information is pretty compelling.
And this red oval is centered on the town of Ontario.
That town is the most likely home base for the killer. It's time to start nailing this case down.
Right now, we have 2 persons of interest in this case. We also have a composite drawing of someone that a witness saw Jackie talking to the night she went missing. So I'm at Brock University to meet with a researcher who specializes in facial perception. I'm hoping to see whether the composite drawing resembles either of our persons of interest.
The problem with his face, as you can see, is that it's incredibly grainy, and so that makes it quite difficult to find some of the edges.
This is a picture of David.
David's image is quite good. He's looking straight ahead.
So can you perhaps explain to me how you're going to compare these images to each other?
I'll try to identify ways in which this composite is distinctive by comparing them to an average face. This is the Caucasian average. So we'll find out how it differs. Then what we'll do is we'll do some measurements on David's face and on face and see whether they differ in the same way or the opposite way. Now, if we look at he only shares distinctive features in 2 ways. What's really interesting about his face is his forehead is particularly large. It's so much larger than average that I would consider that to be a fairly important difference. You can see that David does have a small forehead, and if we go from the brow to the middle of the lips, it's also larger. So in other words, just like the composite, the middle of his face seems to be relatively large. He seems to have a smallish chin. Where I have little green check marks, that indicates that he differs from the average face in the same way as that composite drawing. David has 4 green check marks compared to having only 2, which means David is more similar to the composite. It's not a positive ID, but it's saying it could be.
We just have to be careful to what extent we take these results, because the sketch was not necessarily Jackie's murderer.
I've worked a lot of weird cases in my day. Jackie English's case is probably the most twisted I've ever encountered personally. So who are we left with? Renee, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I went to Brock University to meet with Dr. Kathy Modlock. She was able to establish that the sketch could be of David, and it is less likely to be that of our other person of interest, but it doesn't mean that David is the person who was the basis for the sketch.
Peter, I come to you with respect to the forensic geographic profile.
I reran it to see, without any prior assumptions of who killed Jackie, what does the geographic profile algorithm tell us? And sure enough, like before, the lights right up. And the geographic profile prioritizes David over all our persons of interest.
Along with Peter's geographic profile, we know from news reports from that period that this David character was convicted of dumping his victim's body just north of his hometown. 3 years later, Jackie English's penny loaves turn up just a few meters away. This is not a coincidence. Dania, with respect to our second person of interest, what were we able to find out?
He was convicted and sentenced to prison for 3 years. In 1970, a year after Jackie's murder, he abducted, attacked, and confined a female in her car. She did escape by rolling out of the moving vehicle.
Eerily similar in MO to what happened in Jackie's case. And the question is, what happened to him after that?
We were able to confirm that this person is currently living in Scotland. However, we don't know exactly where he is. Searching for him, doing whatever I possibly could, I could not get anything.
Marilyn's relative is a ghost. Monty?
Well, David was not a ghost. I found him. He was fully paroled and released from prison in 1980 after serving 10 years for non-capital murder. He's moved around quite a bit over the last 40 years, but he's out there.
In 6 weeks, given the age of this case, we made remarkable progress to narrow down our list of suspects. Without ruling out the second person, we need to prioritize David as the prime suspect. The squad can take this case no further, and the police have received a copy of our research and analysis. We identified 5 people of interest in this investigation, and we're now down to 2. One is Marilyn's relative.
Yes.
And the second is a person named David. Let's talk about Marilyn's relative first. You said Jackie would never get in a car with someone she didn't know.
Yes.
They had met at least once or twice.
Yes.
So Jackie would presumably get in the car with him. In 1970, he abducted another woman and held her in a car by her throat until she jumped out of a moving car and escaped with her life. He was then jailed for 3 years and has since moved to Scotland. You can't rule out his earlier behavior, his predictors, as being, good indicators of what he was capable of. So the next thing we did was we conducted what's called a geographic profile. It was deemed highly accurate in terms of pinpointing an offender's probable home base. Our geographic profile of all places in the world points to Ontario. In 1960, David lived in 1960, he had already killed. This can't be dismissed as a coincidence. No. Statistically, all of these factors in total point to him slightly more than Marilyn's relative. Again, we can't rule out either one.
Is he still in jail?
He's not.
Oh.
But we know where he is. In fact, he is alive and out there. We'll put this case very much back into the public interest.
We left no stone unturned. We did everything we possibly could.
I'm just finally happy that we have a suspect. I was apprehensive before coming in. Now I'm excited because it is an opening to an answer. Life is cruel because the older you get, the more you tend to miss someone because you realize you should have a sister. or he should have nieces and nephews. She should have been here. She should have been part of our lives.
Thank you.